My brother inherited Dad's empire. I got the dusty workshop. He never saw the twist coming. After the will was read, my brother stood up, smiled in front of the entire room, and said, "She got Dad's broken house and his dusty old workshop. I guess karma really is a DIY project." Everyone laughed. I said nothing. What Leo did not know, what none of them knew, was that inside that worthless workshop, buried under sawdust and silence, was a secret worth far more than the business he inherited, and I was the only one who knew how to find it. The lawyer, Mr. Albright, cleared his throat and started gathering his papers. The conference room at Morrison Legal smelled like leather and disappointment. My cousins avoided eye contact. My Aunt Susan suddenly found her phone fascinating. My Uncle David pretended to study a painting on the wall, some generic landscape that probably came with the building. Leo stood there, straightening his Italian suit, soaking in his victory like it was cologne. The Rolex on his wrist caught the fluorescent light as he made a show of checking the time. $5 million company, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Guess Dad knew who could actually handle real responsibility. I pressed my thumb against the brass key to the workshop until it left a mark on my skin. The metal was warm, almost alive. Around the conference table, family members shifted uncomfortably. My cousin Jennifer opened her mouth like she wanted to say something supportive, then closed it again. Nobody wanted to challenge the golden child on his coronation day. Mr. Albright glanced at me, then at Leo, and opened his mouth. "There is actually one more thing regarding the estate." But Leo was already halfway to the door, phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah, Marcus. The meeting just finished. Everything went exactly as planned. We can move forward with the acquisition talks." He paused at the doorway, turning back with that smile that had charmed teachers, investors, and our parents for 35 years. "Send whatever paperwork to my assistant, Albright, and Clara." He looked directly at me. "If you need help clearing out that old junk from the workshop, I know a good demolition crew." The door closed with the soft click of expensive wood. The room exhaled. Several relatives suddenly remembered urgent appointments. Within 90 seconds, only Mr. Albright and I remained. "Miss Vance," he said quietly, adjusting his wireframe glasses, "your father left additional instructions, but they were specifically for you. When you have time, perhaps we could." "Not today," I said, standing up. My legs felt hollow, like someone had replaced my bones with paper tubes. "I need to go home first." He nodded, pulling a business card from his jacket. "Call me when you are ready. And Clara, your father spoke of you often in our meetings. He was particular about how things were distributed." I took the card without looking at it. Outside, the Portland rain had started again, that specific northwest drizzle that never quite commits to being actual weather. I sat in my 10-year-old Subaru for 20 minutes, watching water streak down the windshield, before I could make myself drive. That was 3 months ago. 3 months since my father, Arthur Vance, master craftsman and founder of Vance Artisanry, left me what everyone thought was nothing. 3 months since Leo inherited an empire built on reputation and perfect grain patterns. 3 months since I discovered that sometimes the most valuable inheritance is the one nobody else can see. But to understand why my father did what he did, you need to understand who Arthur Vance really was. He was not a man of many words. Growing up, I could count on one hand the times he said, "I love you," out loud, but his hands spoke volumes. They could transform a piece of raw walnut into something that belonged in the Smithsonian. They could feel imperfections in wood that were invisible to the eye. They built Vance Artisanry from a garage operation in Bend, Oregon, into a company that had a 2-year waiting list for custom pieces. People called him the Wood Whisperer, though he hated that name with the quiet intensity he reserved for things that offended his sense of precision. "Wood does not whisper," he would say, running his palm along a piece of cherry. "It tells you exactly what it wants to be. You just have to listen." Leo never listened. Not to Wood, not to Dad, not to anyone except the voice in his head that said bigger, faster, more. While I spent summers in the workshop learning how to read grain patterns and mix stains, Leo spent them at business camps in Seattle learning spreadsheets and market penetration strategies. He came home talking about scalability and vertical integration. Dad would listen patiently, nodding at the right moments, but I saw the way his jaw tightened when Leo suggested outsourcing production to China. "He has ambition," Dad told me one night, when I was 17. We were in the workshop and I was helping him apply the finish to a dining table that would eventually sell for $40,000. But ambition without patience is just expensive noise. Then why do you let him think he will run the company? I asked. Dad was quiet for so long I thought he had not heard me. Then he said, because sometimes people need to arrive at wisdom through their own mistakes, and sometimes, he trailed off, focusing intently on a spot that did not need attention. Sometimes you protect what matters by letting people see only what they expect to see. I did not understand what he meant then. I do now. I studied materials science at Oregon State, not because I wanted to leave the family business, but because I wanted to understand it at a molecular level. Why did certain finishes last decades while others cracked in months? What was happening when wood aged? How did moisture and heat change the cellular structure? My professors thought I was obsessive. Leo thought I was wasting tuition on fancy theories. But Dad understood. He would call me every Sunday night, and we would talk for hours about polymer chains and wood crystallization. He sent me samples of failed finishes to analyze under the university's electron microscope. When I discovered that one of his experimental formulas was creating a unique molecular bond with the cellulose fibers, he drove 3 hours to Corvallis just to take me to dinner. You see what others miss, he said over dessert. That is a rare gift, Clara. Never let anyone convince you it is not valuable. Then he got sick. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3. The doctors gave him 18 months if he responded well to treatment. He lasted 14. I moved back home the day after his diagnosis. Dropped everything. My apartment in Portland, my freelance projects, the life I had been building. Leo flew in from Seattle for a weekend, set up a few meetings with oncologists, then flew back. You are so much better at this stuff, he said, meaning the actual care, the messy, unglamorous work of keeping someone alive. Those 14 months changed me in ways I am still discovering. I learned the names of 17 different medications and what time each one had to be administered. I learned how to change IV bags and clean feeding tubes. I learned that dignity is not about being strong, it is about being present when strength fails. Dad and I developed a routine. Morning medications at 6, breakfast at 7, scrambled eggs when he could manage them, protein shakes when he could not. Then, if he felt strong enough, we would go to the workshop. Not to work, just to be there. He would sit in his old leather chair, the one with stuffing coming out of the left arm, and tell me stories about each tool, each project, each discovery. See that burn mark on the workbench? He said one morning, pointing to a dark stain near the vise. That is from 1998. I was trying to create a heat-resistant finish. Mixed the wrong chemicals. Nearly burned the whole shop down. He smiled, the kind that came rarely in those final months. Your mother was so angry she did not speak to me for 3 days, but that mistake taught me about flashpoints, led to the breakthrough that made our reputation. Leo visited twice more during those 14 months. Both times, he spent more time on conference calls than with Dad. The second visit, I found him in the workshop while Dad was sleeping, on a video call with potential investors. The transition will be seamless, he was saying. I have been effectively running operations remotely for 2 years. Once I have full control, we can implement the expansion strategy immediately. He saw me in the doorway and did not even pause. Just held up a finger, 1 minute, and kept talking about profit margins and growth potential. Dad was dying 50 feet away, and Leo was already dividing up his legacy. That night, after Leo left for his hotel downtown, Dad asked me to wheel him out to the workshop. This was near the end, when walking more than 10 steps left him gasping. We sat in the darkness, surrounded by the smell of cedar and linseed oil, and the peculiar silence that fills spaces where work has stopped. Clara, he said, and his voice was tissue paper thin. Do you know why I never expanded beyond Oregon? You said it would compromise quality. That is what I told people. He reached out, his hand skeletal but still steady, and touched the nearest workbench. The truth is, I discovered something 20 years ago. Something that could have made us bigger than any furniture company in the world, but bigger is not always better. Sometimes bigger means losing control of what matters most. He pointed to a shelf in the corner, lined with leather-bound journals, their spines faded and dust-covered. My real work is in there. 20 years of experiments, failures, discoveries. Leo would sell it to the highest bidder without understanding what it means. But you, He turned to look at me, and even in the darkness, his eyes were sharp. You have the patience to understand it, and the wisdom to protect it. Dad? What are you talking about? But he was already fading, that burst of clarity dissolving back into exhaustion. I wheeled him back to the house, helped him into bed, administered his nighttime medications. He fell asleep, holding my hand, his grip still surprisingly strong. Those were nearly his last coherent words to me. 2 weeks later, on a Thursday morning while I was making his breakfast, Earl Grey tea with honey, scrambled eggs slightly runny, the way he had liked them for 40 years, I found him in his chair by the window. He was looking out at the workshop, and for a moment I thought he was just sleeping, but the stillness was too complete. Even in sleep, there is movement. In death, there is only absence. At the funeral, Leo gave a speech that sounded like a corporate keynote. He used the word synergy 4 times and legacy 7 times. He talked about market position and brand value and honoring Dad's memory by taking the company to new heights. I stood in the back row, holding a small vial of wood stain Dad had been working on the week before he died. It caught the light like liquid amber, and I found myself studying it instead of listening to my brother turn our father into a business plan. The reading of the will was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Those 3 weeks, Leo called me exactly once to ask if I had found any important documents in the house. Contracts, patents, anything like that, he said. Need to have everything in order for the transition. Just household papers, I lied, thinking of the journals I had glanced at but not really examined. Something about them felt private, like reading someone's diary while they were still warm in the ground. Which brings us back to that conference room, to Leo's laughter, to the brass key that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I drove straight from the lawyer's office to the workshop. Parked in the same spot Dad had used for 30 years, the gravel worn into grooves by his truck tires. The building looked smaller than I remembered, paint peeling from the exterior walls, moss growing on the north side of the roof. Leo had been right about one thing: from the outside, it looked worthless. The key turned in the lock with a grinding sound that suggested rust and neglect. Inside, dust motes floated in the afternoon light streaming through dirty windows. Everything was exactly as Dad had left it, tools hanging in their designated spots, half-finished projects covered with canvas, the leather chair with its escaping stuffing. I walked through slowly, running my fingers over surfaces that had not been touched in months. The main workbench, scarred by decades of use, the lathe that Dad had bought secondhand in 1987 and rebuilt 3 times. The wall of clamps, each one hung according to size, because chaos in tools means chaos in work. In the corner, the journals waited. I pulled one at random. Journal number 7, dated 1994. The pages were covered in Dad's precise handwriting, but it was not what I expected. Instead of woodworking notes, there were chemical formulas, temperature charts, molecular diagrams that looked like they belonged in my college textbooks, not in a craftsman's notebook. I grabbed another. Number 19, from 2003. More formulas, but different. These showed application methods, cure times, durability tests. One page had a photo paper clip to it, a piece of oak that had been subjected to what looked like torture, burned, scratched, submerged in water, exposed to UV light, but in the photo it gleamed like it had just been finished. My hands were shaking as I pulled out journal after journal, 43 in total, dating back to 1987, each one a piece of something larger, like movements in a symphony that only made sense when played together. Then I found it. Journal number 31, dated June 15th, 2009. Tucked inside the front cover was a sealed envelope with my name written across it in blue ink. Not Clara Vance, but Clara, my daughter who sees what others miss. I sat down in Dad's leather chair and opened it with the careful precision he had taught me. Inside were 3 pages of his handwriting, and every word changed everything. Clara, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are exactly where I hoped you would be. Not because I manipulated events, but because I knew you would be the only one to look closely enough to find this. What you hold in your hands is 20 years of work that the world is not ready for. Maybe it never will be, but I trust you to make that decision. The formula is not in one place. I learned from history that the most valuable secrets are the ones that cannot be stolen in a single theft. It is scattered across all 43 journals, like pieces of a puzzle only someone with your training could solve. When complete, it creates a finish that makes any wood effectively indestructible. Waterproof, fireproof, scratch-proof, UV resistant. It self-heals minor damage at a molecular level. It gets stronger with age instead of weaker. I discovered the base formula by accident in 1991, trying to solve a simple problem: how to make wood last longer in marine environments. What I found was something that changes the fundamental structure of cellulose fibers, creating bonds that should not be possible according to conventional chemistry. I never patented it because patents expire. They also require disclosure. Trade secrets, if properly protected, last forever. Leo has the company, but without this formula, he has a reputation built on work that will never be replicated. Our current finishes are good, but they are not this. I have been using diluted versions for select pieces, enough to build our reputation, but not enough to reveal the secret. You have the formula, but without the company, you have knowledge without platform. The choice is yours: protect it, sell it, or use it to build something entirely new. Just promise me you will not let it fall into hands that would exploit it. This formula could revolutionize construction, shipbuilding, historical preservation in the wrong hands. It could also accelerate deforestation by making every piece of wood, regardless of quality or source, commercially valuable. There is one more thing. Check the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet behind the tax returns from 2012. You will understand when you find it. Your father, who loves you more than words can say. I read the letter 3 times before it fully sank in. Dad had not just left me the workshop, he had left me the key to everything the company's reputation was built on. You know, life has these moments where everything shifts. Some of you watching this might know exactly what I mean. Maybe you are in a small town, like Bend, where I was sitting. Maybe you are in a big city, watching this on your commute. Wherever you are watching from, I would love to know. Leave a comment below and tell me your city. Sometimes the biggest discoveries happen in the smallest, quietest moments, and I would love to know where in the world this story is reaching. I spent the rest of that day going through the journals systematically. It was like learning a new language where Dad had invented his own grammar. Temperature specifications in Journal 7 had to be cross-referenced with humidity controls in Journal 23. Chemical ratios in Journal 19 only made sense when combined with application methods from Journal 38. He had made it impossible for anyone to stumble upon the formula accidentally. You had to know chemistry, woodworking, and most importantly, you had to know him. The filing cabinet he mentioned was in the corner, covered by a decade of dust. The bottom drawer stuck, requiring me to use a screwdriver as a lever. Behind the tax returns, wrapped in oilcloth, was a wooden box about the size of a hardcover book. Inside, nestled in velvet, were 5 small vials of liquid, each one labeled with a date and a formula variation, and underneath those, another envelope. This one was shorter. These are the only complete samples in existence. Guard them carefully. Formula 4 is the most stable. Start there. Trust your training. Trust your instincts. And remember, the finish is what matters most. I held Formula 4 up to the light. It was completely clear, with an almost imperceptible golden shimmer that seemed to move like it was alive. It looked like nothing special. That was probably the point. For the next 3 weeks, I barely left the workshop. I told everyone I was cleaning it out, organizing Dad's things, even hired a dumpster and made a show of throwing out old drop cloths and broken equipment. Leo called once to ask if I had found anything valuable. Just memories, I told him. Well, do not get too sentimental, he said. I might have a buyer for the property. Some developer wants to put in condos. Could get you a decent price, enough to start over somewhere. I will think about it, I said, looking at the beaker of formula I had just spent 16 hours perfecting. The breakthrough came at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday. I had been mixing compounds for 6 straight hours, my eyes burning from exhaustion and chemical fumes despite the ventilation system. The formula required a precise sequence, adding each component at specific temperatures, maintaining exact pH levels, stirring at calculated speeds. 1 degree too hot and it would congeal into useless paste. 1 degree too cold and it would separate like bad salad dressing. But when it worked, when everything aligned, the liquid transformed. It went from murky brown to absolutely clear in an instant, like watching muddy water suddenly become crystal. The golden shimmer appeared as if from nowhere, swirling through the liquid like microscopic galaxies. I grabbed a piece of scrap pine, the cheapest wood in the workshop, and applied the finish with one of Dad's old brushes. The wood drank it in eagerly, the grain darkening for a moment before beginning to glow with an inner light I had never seen before. It was like the wood had been sleeping its whole life and had suddenly woken up. 24 hours later, after the formula had fully cured, I performed the test Dad had outlined in Journal 41. I took a hammer to that piece of pine. The hammer bounced off, leaving not even a dent. I held a blowtorch to it for 60 seconds. Not a single scorch mark. I submerged it in water for a week. When I pulled it out, it looked better than before, the grain more pronounced, the golden glow deeper. I had it. The formula that could revolutionize not just furniture, but construction, shipbuilding, housing, any industry that used wood. A formula that could make $100 lumber perform like $1,000 exotic hardwood. A formula that could make temporary structures permanent and permanent structures eternal. And Leo had no idea it existed. Speaking of Leo, he had been busy through the industry grapevine. I learned he was in advanced talks with SynCorp, a massive conglomerate that specialized in buying family businesses and scaling them into international brands. The number being thrown around was $8 million. He was going to sell Dad's life's work to a company that would turn handcrafted heritage into mass-produced mediocrity. The news hit me like cold water. It was one thing for Leo to inherit the company. It was another for him to immediately sell it to the highest bidder, erasing Dad's name and legacy for a quick profit. I had two options. Let him sell and watch everything Dad built disappear into corporate machinery, or stop him. I chose option 2, but I could not confront him directly. That was not how you won against someone like Leo. He had all the power, all the legal rights. I had to be smarter. I had to use what Dad had taught me, that patience and precision beat haste and force, every time. First, I needed legal protection. I drove to Portland and hired Margaret Chen, an intellectual property attorney who specialized in trade secrets and patent law. When I showed her the formula and the test results, she actually gasped. "This is revolutionary," she said, holding the treated wood sample up to her office light. "The applications are endless. This could be worth hundreds of millions." "I do not want hundreds of millions," I told her. "I want protection, and I want it fast." She explained my options. Patents would offer strong protection, but would require full disclosure of the formula, making it public knowledge after 20 years. Trade secret protection could last forever, but was harder to enforce. The third option was to patent the application method while keeping the exact formula as a trade secret, a hybrid approach that would give me both protection and secrecy. "How fast can we move?" I asked. "If you have documentation proving you developed this, we can file provisional patents within days. Full patents will take months, but once filed, you are protected." I handed her Dad's journals, all 43 of them, now digitized and backed up in 3 locations. "Will this work?" She smiled. "Your father was thorough. This is better documentation than most corporations maintain." We filed for patents under a new company name, Vance Legacy Innovations. Not the furniture company Leo inherited, but something entirely new. The patents covered the application methods, the curing process, the testing protocols, everything except the actual chemical formula, which would remain a trade secret. Margaret structured it so that even if someone figured out part of the process, they could not replicate it without risking massive lawsuits. The paperwork was filed on a Friday afternoon. The following Monday morning, Leo called me for the first time since the will reading. "Hey, Clara," he said, and his voice had that fake warmth he used on clients he was about to overcharge. "I have some exciting news about the company. I am closing a deal with SynCorp, $8.5 million. I wanted you to know before it goes public." "That is great, Leo," I said, stirring a fresh batch of formula in a beaker. "Dad would be proud." There was a pause. He had probably expected me to fight, to beg for a piece of the sale, to show some emotion he could dismiss as feminine hysteria. "Yeah, well," he continued, recovering, "I thought maybe you would want to be there for the signing. The CEO wants to see the original workshop. You know, for the press release, heritage and authenticity, that whole angle. The workshop, my workshop. He wanted to parade strangers through it like it was a museum of his success." "When?" I asked. "Next Thursday. 2 p.m. I will be there. Great. Oh, and Clara? Maybe clean the place up a bit? It is probably a disaster. I looked around at my carefully organized chemistry equipment, the labeled samples, the 43 journals now locked in a fireproof safe. I will make sure it is presentable. He hung up without saying goodbye, just like at the lawyer's office. Just like always. If you are still watching, then you know this feeling. The moment when someone who has dismissed you, overlooked you, underestimated you, hands you the perfect opportunity to show them exactly how wrong they were. That anticipation, that careful planning, that knowledge that justice is coming, it is better than any revenge fantasy. If you have ever had a moment like this, or if you are waiting for yours, hit that subscribe button, because what happened next was worth every hour of preparation. I spent the next 4 days preparing, not cleaning, but creating. I produced samples of wood treated with the formula, oak that looked like it had been dipped in golden glass, walnut that shimmered with an inner light, cherry that seemed to glow from within, even particle board, the cheapest possible material, transformed into something that looked like it belonged in a palace. I also prepared documentation, certificates of analysis, test results, time-stamped photographs showing the formula's development, and most importantly, the patent filing numbers that proved I owned the rights to everything that made Dad's work special. Thursday arrived gray and drizzling, typical Oregon winter weather. I stood in the workshop wearing Dad's old canvas apron, the one with stains that mapped 30 years of experimentation. Through the window, I watched Leo's Tesla pull up, followed by a black Suburban with tinted windows. He got out first, opening an umbrella for a man in his 60s. Silver-haired, wearing a coat that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Theodore Brennan, CEO of Syncorp. They walked in, and Leo's face immediately twisted with embarrassment. The workshop was not cleaned up in the way he expected. Instead, it looked like what it was, a working laboratory. "Clara, this is Mr. Brennan," Leo said through gritted teeth. "Mr. Brennan? My sister? She is staying here temporarily." "Actually," I said, extending my hand to Brennan. "I work here, every day, just like my father did." Brennan shook my hand, his eyes already scanning the workshop, landing on the samples I had strategically placed on the center table where they caught the gray light from the windows. "What are those?" he asked, moving closer. "Those," I said, "are what you are actually trying to buy." Leo laughed, that nervous sound he made when he was losing control of a situation. "Clara, Mr. Brennan is here to see the workshop, not—" "Mr. Brennan?" I interrupted, picking up the treated oak sample. "What do you know about the Vance finishing process?" Brennan's eyes sharpened. He had not become CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company by ignoring important details. "I know it produces the highest quality furniture finishes in the Pacific Northwest. That is why we are interested in acquiring the company." "But do you know why it is the highest quality?" "Clara," Leo warned. I ignored him. My father developed a proprietary formula, one that he never shared with anyone at the company, not with his employees, not with his managers, not even with my brother, the heir to the business. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Leo's hand twitched toward his phone, probably wanting to call his lawyer. "The formula," I continued, picking up a different sample, "makes any wood nearly indestructible. Waterproof, fireproof, scratch-resistant. It self-heals minor damage at a molecular level. It is the reason Vance furniture lasts generations while competitors' pieces deteriorate in decades." I handed Brennan the oak sample. "Try to scratch it." He pulled out a pocket knife. Silver, engraved, probably a gift from some board of directors. He dragged it across the surface with significant pressure. Nothing. Not a mark. He tried again, harder. Still nothing. "The formula," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "is not part of Vance artisanry. It never was. It belongs to a separate entity, Vance Legacy Innovations, of which I am the sole proprietor. I filed the patents last week." The silence in the workshop was so complete I could hear the rain pattering against the windows. Leo's face went through a spectrum of colors, red to white to a concerning shade of purple. "You cannot do that," he finally managed. "Dad left me the company. Everything in it." "He left you the company?" I agreed. "But the formula was never part of the company. Check the books. The company purchases the finish from an outside supplier. That supplier was Dad, personally. Now it is me." Brennan set down the sample carefully. like it might explode. Are you saying Vance Artisanry does not own its signature product? That is exactly what I am saying. You would be buying a name, some equipment, and a list of clients who expect a quality you can no longer deliver. Leo grabbed my arm, not hard enough to hurt, but enough to show his desperation. Clara, we need to talk, privately. No, I said, pulling free. We should have talked months ago, when Dad was dying and you were too busy to care. When you called his life's work a quaint family business. When you laughed at me for getting the workshop. I turned back to Brennan, who was watching us with the calculating expression of someone recalibrating a business deal in real time. If you want the formula, you need to deal with me, not him. This is ridiculous, Leo said, his voice cracking. She is lying. She is trying to sabotage the deal out of spite. I pulled out my phone and showed Brennan the email from the patent office, confirming the filing, then the certificate of incorporation for Vance Legacy Innovations, then the test results from an independent laboratory confirming the formula's properties. Brennan studied each document carefully. What are your terms? He asked me. Not Leo. The formula is not for sale, I said, but I am willing to license it exclusively to companies that meet my environmental and quality standards, companies that will use it to create products that last generations, not fiscal quarters. Leo's phone rang. He looked at the screen, and his face went even paler. The board, he whispered. They are calling about the deal. Of course they were. News of an $8 million acquisition had probably leaked. Stock prices were probably moving based on the announcement, and now it was falling apart in a dusty workshop in Bend, Oregon. I need time to consider this, Brennan said. He pulled out his card, but instead of handing it to Leo, he gave it to me. I will be in touch, Miss Vance. He left, his driver holding an umbrella that did nothing to shield the cold reality that had just crashed down on my brother. Leo stood frozen as the Suburban pulled away, his hand still holding his silent phone. You destroyed everything, he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. No, I said. I saved it. Dad's formula will not be buried in some corporate vault or watered down for mass production. It will be used the way he intended, with respect, with purpose, with patience. I could sue you. You could try. But my lawyer is very good, and the documentation is very clear. Dad kept meticulous records of developing this formula personally, outside of company time, with his own resources. He walked to the door, then stopped. You know what? You two were perfect for each other. Stubborn, self-righteous, completely unable to see the bigger picture. The bigger picture? I laughed, but there was no joy in it. Leo, you never even asked what Dad was working on all those years. You never spent a single hour learning the craft. You inherited a business you never understood, and now you are angry because the one who did the work is getting the reward. The work? He spun around, his face contorted with rage. I built the company's value. I made the connections. I negotiated the contracts. You sold smoke, I interrupted. Dad built the fire. I tended it, and now I control it. He left without another word. The Tesla's tires spun slightly on the wet gravel, the only sign of his anger that he allowed himself. I stood alone in the workshop, surrounded by the ghosts of 30 years of my father's dedication. The rain had stopped, and weak sunlight filtered through the dusty windows, making the formula samples glow like captured fire. For the first time since Dad died, I felt him there with me. Not as a presence, but as an absence that finally made sense. He had not abandoned me. He had trusted me with everything that mattered. The next 6 months passed in a blur of decisions and developments. Brennan never called, but others did. Word spread through industry channels that Vance Legacy Innovations had developed something revolutionary. I fielded inquiries from Japan, Germany, Brazil, New Zealand. Everyone wanted the formula. I was selective. The first license went to a sustainable building company in Vermont that was creating affordable housing designed to last centuries, not decades. The second went to a heritage furniture restoration firm in North Carolina that was saving pieces from the colonial era. The third went to a wooden boat builder in Maine who nearly cried when he saw what the formula could do for marine applications. Each license was carefully structured. They could use the formula, but only for specific applications, only with approved materials, only with regular quality inspections. I was not just protecting Dad's invention. I was protecting his philosophy that things should be built to last, that craftsmanship matters, that patience beats profit. Meanwhile, Leo's situation deteriorated rapidly. Without the formula, Vance Artisanry was just another high-end furniture company with a good reputation and no competitive advantage. The Syncorp deal collapsed publicly. The board, furious about the embarrassment and the legal complications, pushed him out. Within 3 months, he was forced to sell the company for less than half its supposed value just to cover the legal fees from breaking the Syncorp contract. I heard about it through industry contacts, not from him. We had not spoken since that day in the workshop, but the details trickled in through former employees, suppliers, people who had watched the golden boy fall from his throne. Leo had tried to pivot, to save face, to spin the narrative, but without the formula, without the reputation, without the careful foundation Dad had built, he had nothing but debt and damaged pride. One morning, almost exactly 1 year after Dad died, I stood in the workshop mixing a new batch of Formula 7, an enhanced version designed specifically for outdoor applications. The workshop had been transformed. New equipment lined one wall, state-of-the-art spectrometers and testing apparatus, but Dad's original workbench remained in its spot, untouched, like an altar to patience and precision. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number with a Seattle area code. Clara, can we talk? L. I stared at it for a long minute, then deleted it. I was not ready. Maybe I would never be ready. But 3 hours later, another text came through. I am in Bend, at the Riverside Motel, room 12. I will be here until tomorrow noon. The Riverside Motel, a place that rented rooms by the week to contractors and people passing through. A place Leo would have sneered at 2 years ago. I finished the formula batch, sealed it carefully, and drove across town. He answered the door in jeans and a flannel shirt. I had never seen him wear before. The Rolex was gone. The Italian shoes were gone. Even his posture was different. Shoulders curved inward, like he was protecting himself from a wind only he could feel. Thanks for coming, he said, stepping aside to let me in. The room smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and defeat. We sat on opposite beds, the space between us feeling like an ocean. He looked older. Not just the gray creeping into his temples, but something fundamental had shifted. The confidence that had defined him, that had made him Leo, was gone. I am broke, he said, without preamble. Actually broke. The company sale barely covered the legal fees. I tried to start over, tried to leverage my connections, but word got out about the formula situation. Nobody wants to partner with someone who lost an $8 million deal because he did not know what his own company was selling. I said nothing. There was nothing to say that would not sound like gloating or pity, and he deserved neither. I have been living in my car for 2 weeks, he continued. The Tesla got repossessed 3 months ago. I am driving a 20-year-old Honda that burns oil. I got a job at a hardware store in Tacoma. Assistant manager. They have no idea who I used to be. Why are you telling me this? He looked up, and for the first time in our entire lives, I saw genuine humility in his eyes. Because I finally understand what Dad tried to teach me, what you both tried to show me. I thought success meant being bigger than him, selling for more than he ever could. But he was not trying to be big. He was trying to be permanent, to make things that outlasted him. He pulled something from his pocket, a small piece of wood, oak by the look of it, with an amateur attempt at finish. I have been teaching myself, YouTube videos, library books. It is terrible. I know, but I made it. With my hands. And for the first time, I understood why Dad spent all those hours in the workshop. It was not about the money. It was about creating something from nothing, about leaving a mark that matters. What do you want from me, Leo? Nothing, he said quickly. I mean, I am not here to ask for money or a job or forgiveness. I wanted you to know that I finally get it, and that Dad was right to leave you the workshop. You were the only one who understood what it really meant. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, a truck rumbled past on Highway 97, the same highway Dad had driven countless times, delivering furniture to clients who would pass it down to their grandchildren. I am expanding, I said finally. Vance Legacy Innovations, we are building a research facility. I need someone who understands business, real business, not just flash and presentations. Someone who has learned the difference between value and price. His head snapped up. Clara? Entry level. I continued. You would report to my operations manager. The pay will not be what you are used to. You will start in fulfillment, learning how we package and ship the formula. If you last 6 months, we can talk about moving you to contracts. And if you ever, even once, disrespect what Dad built or what I am building, you are gone. Why? He asked. After everything? Because Dad believed in second chances, and because failure is just another kind of education, if you are willing to learn from it. He nodded, swallowing hard. When do I start? Monday, 8 a.m. Do not be late. That was 18 months ago. Leo still works for Vance Legacy Innovations. He started in the shipping department, learning how to package hazardous materials, how to track international shipments, how to manage inventory. He was terrible at first, his hands soft from years of typing, his back aching from actual labor, but he showed up, every day, on time. After 6 months, I moved him to contracts. Turns out when you strip away the ego and the need to be the loudest voice in the room, he actually inherited some of Dad's insight. He just needed to fail completely to find it. He negotiated our partnership with a Japanese company that is using the formula to preserve historical temples. He structured a deal with the Norwegian government for their maritime applications. He even caught a clause in a contract that would have cost us millions. We are not close. We may never be. The wounds are too deep, the years of resentment too ingrained, but we are something. Colleagues, relatives, two people trying to honor a legacy in different ways. The workshop has been completely renovated now. State-of-the-art equipment sits next to Dad's old tools, a blend of tradition and innovation that would have made him proud. We keep his original workbench in the corner, untouched, the burn mark from 1998 still visible. Sometimes I catch Leo standing there, running his hands over the wood grain, finally understanding what Dad tried to teach him all those years ago, that the work itself is the reward. The formula has evolved too. We are on version 12 now, with variations for different climates, different wood types, different applications. Each one is carefully tested, meticulously documented. We are not just preserving Dad's discovery. We are building on it, pushing it forward, making it better. Last week, a magazine wanted to do a profile on us, the Vance siblings, a story of innovation and redemption. Leo wanted to do it. Old habits die hard, but I said no. Dad never liked publicity. He let his work speak for itself. Besides, the real story is not about us. It is about what happens when you pay attention to the details everyone else ignores. When you value craft over profit, when you understand that sometimes the most valuable inheritance is not what looks impressive, but what requires patience to understand. This morning, I stood in the workshop as the sun rose over Bend, painting everything gold through the windows. The same light that caught Dad's formula samples that day with Brennan. The same light he watched from his chair in his final days. It looked like fire, but it did not burn. It just illuminated. I picked up my phone and started recording a voice memo for our team. New batch of Formula 12 testing complete. Results exceed expectations. Beginning production next week. Then I paused, looking at the workbench where Dad had spent thousands of hours perfecting his craft, where he had hidden a secret that could have made him famous but chose instead to keep it safe until the right hands could hold it. Note for the record, I added, the finish is what matters most. If you have ever been the quiet one, the overlooked one, the one who stayed behind while others took the spotlight, you know this feeling. That moment when patience becomes power, when silence becomes strength, when everyone finally sees what you knew all along, that the real value was never in the noise, it was in the work, in the details, in the patience to let truth reveal itself in its own time. And if that resonates with you, if you have been waiting for your moment of vindication, or if you just love stories where the underestimated become the undeniable, subscribe to this channel, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes the best revenge is not destroying those who wronged you. It is building something so solid, so undeniable, that their dismissal becomes irrelevant.